You want to dictate exactly how every plan turns out, how every day goes, and what the people around you do. You hold on tight because somewhere along the line, you learned that control equals safety. But there is a cruel paradox at work here. The tighter you squeeze, the less you actually keep. Consider a young monk named Maro. Growing up, life taught him a harsh lesson. If you don't fiercely guard what is yours, it will be taken. He watched his father trust the wrong people and lose all his money. He watched his sister give her trust to someone who simply walked away. So Maro learned to hold everything close. He hoarded his time, his energy, and his trust. He gave absolutely nothing away for free. When he joined the monastery, he kept his distance. If the group studied together, Maro studied alone in his room. If a younger monk asked for advice, Maro told him he was busy. He wasn't trying to be cold. He honestly believed that keeping everything tightly packed in his fist made him strong. Over the years, the monks simply stopped inviting him. His world shrank until his days were entirely quiet and alone. He had guarded his life so intensely that he was eventually left holding nothing at all. One evening, the monastery's old master invited Maro to sit down for tea. Without a word, the master placed a small mound of dry rice onto the wooden table between them. He instructed the young monk to scoop up the rice and hold it in a relaxed, open hand. Maro gathered the grains. As long as his hand stayed relaxed, the rice stayed right where it was, resting perfectly secure in the natural cup of his palm. Then the master gave his second instruction. Close your fist and hold it as tight as you possibly can. Maro squeezed his fingers together. Immediately, he felt the sharp crunch of the grains fracturing against each other under the immense pressure. The harder he gripped to secure the rice, the more it broke. White dust and jagged fragments shot out through the tiny spaces between his knuckles. When the master finally told him to open his hand, the damage was obvious. Half the pile had vanished onto the floor, and whatever remained in his palm had been pulverized into fine powder. The fist assumes it is keeping the rice perfectly safe, but the mechanical act of squeezing is identical to the act of destroying. The master placed a second pile of rice on the table. This time, he asked Maro to scoop it up and leave his palm completely open. The grains sat there. They were whole, calm, and entirely intact. There was no pressure forcing them to stay. When the master asked which hand held more rice, the answer was undeniable. The open hand retained the grains simply because it refused to crush them. Think how this applies to our lives. When you hold relationships without forcing them, they are free to exist. You give them room to stay whole. Providing empty space is the mechanism that keeps things securely in place. Applying pressure achieves the exact opposite. The desperate need for control is really just fear, taking the physical shape of a fist. And every time that fist closes, it pushes out the exact things it tries so hard to save. Looking down at the table, Maro saw his entire life reflected back at him. He had been treating his trust, his meticulously laid plans, and his desire for connection exactly like the crushed rice. The other monks hadn't stopped talking to him because they didn't try to connect. They stopped because a closed fist leaves absolutely no structural room for anyone else to enter. He sat in silence, staring at the chalky dust in his right hand and the pristine mound of grains in his left. For his entire life, he had wondered why everything he touched turned to dust. Now he knew he was the one breaking it. The next morning, when the group gathered to study, Maro quietly walked into the room and sat down with them. He didn't offer any defensive explanations. He just allowed himself to be there. Resting his hands on his lap, he left his palms facing upward. He finally accepted the vulnerability required to receive another person. Look at your own life. What are you gripping so tight that it's turning to dust in your hands? It takes courage to stop squeezing, but an open hand is the only way to hold what truly matters.